We definitely went through like a very, very high hype cycle and now has bust. People see a lot of potential in those things, but beyond the initial demo, I don't find myself using them. I'm actually not that much of an early adopter. Like, I want things to work reliably well and fast and cheap. I've tried them all and like it hasn't really stuck. The issue is not iterating fast enough to get a good product. That's the real issue. I've seen bad products scale to distribution and you always run into trouble. Like, this is amateur hour stuff. Build good products for serious businesses, find difficult problems, and then pour distribution on top. You have to do this work to try to improve, but every now and then you need to say, fuck all this, throw it all away, try to like think about the goal that your user actually wants to do and rebuild everything from scratch. If you don't, someone else will and eat your lunch.
Here on Tool Use, we talk a lot about specific tools, implementation, technologies, all that fun stuff. But let's take a step back. Let's get an expert's view on what tools are providing real value today, what builders are getting right, and what they're getting wrong. So in episode 66 of Tool Use, we're joined by Swyx. He's the co-host of the Latent Space podcast, the co-founder of AI Engineer, and recently joined the team at Cognition. He's got a lot of great advice, some spicy takes, so please enjoy this conversation with Swyx.
I got here by kind of having a career in developer tooling before, doing a lot of writing and also having an economist lens on tech because I used to be in finance. I used to trade sell side and buy side options and hedge fund stuff. And then I roundabout the launch of Stable Diffusion, I launched it in space as a newsletter and podcast. And then when I noticed that there was a lack of like practitioner sort of developer type conferences for AI, I started the AI Engineer Conference. And after doing that for about 2.5 years, I felt like I wasn't really having enough, I guess. I was being too neutral maybe, and not having enough equity in like all these companies that are all going to like rocket ship valuations and all that. So most recently, I'm taking a small role at Cognition as well. So those are the main affiliations that I have.
With these AI engineer conferences, some of the talks are incredible. I know you always mention how the hallway track is the best part of it. And I know when I was down in SF, the connections I made there were incredible. But with all the talk, a lot of tools are introduced and kind of either announced or emphasized more people. What do you use in your day-to-day life in the AI tooling front?
I obviously now, because I have free Windsurf, I use Windsurf and Devin. I also do use Cursor, and I think they have different strengths, but also mostly I'm not a regular user of IDEs anymore. Like, I'm professionally studying them and trying to think about like what's next in terms of like how AI can augment programming. Like you, I also use Riverside in the script for my podcast, which all have AI features. I use Super Whisper for sort of voice transcription, which is kind of cool. And, I think the regular sort of like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini thing. I guess one of the more unique workflows that I have is that I have a little Chrome extension that links out to a Gemini gem that transcribes and timestamps every YouTube video that I watch. And I think it should be built into YouTube, but they haven't done it yet. So Gemini is the only one that has a native YouTube understanding. So they have privileged access to YouTube. So I use Gemini gems for that. Like, you could implement it in ChatGPT. Probably someone has, but it probably requires an API key and some external service. Whereas in Gemini, it's free. So why not?
Exactly. If it's built in, and that's where a lot of these deep companies with a lot of integrations are really going to start to shine. One thing I'm curious about is if you've been experimenting with tools that you initially thought had a lot of promise, but ended up either not working with your workflow or the implementation didn't quite land properly, where you still see potential down the road with a few more iterations, but in its current state didn't quite work for you.
That's a fun question. I guess the agentic browsers, people have like Perplexity Comet and Dia and ChatGPT Atlas. I think people see a lot of potential in those things, but beyond the initial demo, I don't find myself using them. And I think there's a little bit of, it's not really a knock on the browser so much as a knock on me of like, I'm actually not that much of an early adopter. Like, I want things to work reliably well and fast and cheap. So that puts me all the way at the end of the adoption curve. Whereas the people who are early adopters don't mind that it doesn't work all the time, don't mind that it's expensive. They want to live in the future. So I think like agentic browser is very high B and have a lot of potential. And so somehow, I've tried them all, and like it hasn't really stuck. Like I'm still doing most of the stuff myself.
Yeah, and actually, we had Neil from Super Whisper on before. I use voice transcription all the time, especially when I'm prompting. The ability to just brain dump and get your stream of consciousness out there instead of being ridiculous and a lot slower with typing, I think has been a massive unlock. And you've also recently posted about how, with an AI coding assistant, not having a Slack integration puts you at a massive disadvantage. Do you have any other thoughts on what type of interfaces builders should focus on to help improve the stickiness or the adoption of their AI tooling?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And thanks for doing your research. I think, yeah, everyone coding should be able to sort of add Slack in their messages, because like that is basically what a human junior engineer would do for you, right? I think the other interfaces, I guess, like I almost want to, I'm tempted to say Slack is the universal interface. Slack is the God interface, because that's where a lot of work gets done in modern tech. Obviously, you want like Linear, Jira, whatever. And then I think that the frontier that I haven't seen people do well yet, but I am very excited about, is voice over phone, telephony. A lot of people do voice over IP, but it's patchy and it drops a lot. It's why you can't really do long conversations with ChatGPT, because it's voice over IP, and the moment you drop connection or something when you're driving, the call's ended and it's not a good experience. Well, phone calls we've been doing for 30 years, and we know how to pick up phone calls and keep them running on a relatively low bit rate. So I think like people should just put voice over telephony and be able to talk to their code base and like, order up tasks and, do personal assistant stuff all through voice, because that is the key. If there is a more king interface than Slack in text, it is voice, because we started speaking before we started writing.
Yeah, and in one area that I'm interested in with voice is I work from home, own office, no big deal. I can talk as long as and as loud as I want, get really animated with it. Some people in the office aren't really comfortable adopting it. And I found there's even a cultural difference where some Asian cultures, they're more comfortable talking on either like WhatsApp or other messenger services in public. And in a lot of Western cultures, you try to be a little more reserved and quiet in public. Do you see the culture shifting to allow voice be more prevalent, or will something like those little not whisper, but like the low volume type models be more successful?
Yeah. This is a bit of a meme, but actually they are dedicated headphones that you can wear that cover your mouth. It's kind of like, it looks very futuristic and kind of Dune-like, but you can just whisper to your machine with a enclosed microphone. Yeah, I mean, in practice, look, like I said, like voice isn't like everywhere yet. Not everyone uses it all the time, and you can whisper. So I don't think this is a huge cultural shift. I just think that at some point it stops becoming the rate limiter on knowledge work, because it is less about the transfer of your prompts from your brain to your AI, and more about like doing the right kinds of work and making sure you like do appropriate amount of like thinking as a human manager of the AIs, before you blurt it out, because you can blurt a bunch of things out, but it will be higher quality if you have more forethought on like what it is you're doing. And I think like that's really why I like the name Cognition for the company, because it's pro thinking, whereas a lot of other vibe coding tools want to turn when you turn your brain off. Cognition wants you to turn your brain on, and sometimes that just means shutting up for a while and thinking a little bit before you act.
Along the same vein, Cognition recently came out with code maps to help you give the developer better understanding of the code base. Do you see any other gap between existing AI coding tools and what the like optimal developer workflow would be to help keep the developer engaged yet sufficiently accelerated that they can ship quickly but keep a grasp of their code base?
That's an interesting one. I'm sure there's a ton. Like if I knew about what they were, I would have like come up with it for I'm not exactly sure. I think like if anything, the way I would describe it is that code does exist in a broader landscape of non-code artifacts that accompany the code, like discussions and Slack threads and linear tickets and conversations offline and all that. And obviously like the system that has all that context would have the prerequisites for being the ones who rule them all. Because if you just don't have the context, we'll never be able to reflect the desires or needs of the business. I mean, so maybe that's the answer is like integrate with everything, just like have all the data. I think there are some people who are like sort of blindly pursuing that, and that's cool. That's quantity. But then you also should think about quality and direction or purpose. I don't think we've like really cracked that in terms of autonomy of a more sort of senior engineer, architect, whatever that is, that instead of you telling them what you want done and they go do it, they would come back to you and say like, I noticed over the last 3 months, we've been doing these things and you have about like a 50% success rate. How about we change architecture entirely or like do a rewrite or like bring on this vendor or whatever and get that up to 99%. Like it's something like that, right? Where it's like more proactive, more thoughtful about your goals. Like they share your goals and they don't really give a crap what you told them to do because they'll happily ignore you if they have a better idea. Because that's more human-like. So, and this now comes not to quantity of data, quantity of integration involved, but just quality of focus and thought and cognition on like, what is it you're really trying to get done here and how can we help?
And to work with that data augmentation or pulling in data from external sources, obviously hot thing right now is MCP, but there tends to be a few more detractors these days where it's polluting the context. You get a lot of context rot if you get too many tools in there. So people are trying to figure out a meta layer on top of MCP servers where it can intelligently select the tools rather than just upload them all. Do you see that as a route worth exploring to pull in external data into these coding or even just general AI workflows? Or do you think we're still missing something to get a good integration of consumer data with the actual workflow?
I think MCP is it. It is tempting to want better. MCP is not perfect. MCP is really just like a different API spec. And yeah, like people have tried to improve upon it, tried to like augment it and whatever. But it has the staying power, it has the branding, it has the backing of a large lab. For those interested, I wrote an article back in March around why MCP won, and I have this bunch of reasons why. And I think like that is generally true. I was never really as hyped about it as some people took me to be, because I can explain why I won. It doesn't mean that I think it's the best thing since sliced bread, but I can explain why I won. And it's very hard for things to win, especially protocols. So once a thing gets some traction, it probably keeps going, and like warts and all, right? The primary thing that MCP does is honestly just gives people an AI angle to write better integrations, write better APIs. Yeah, you could have done that with OpenAPI or whatever, but you didn't. And now there's this MCP thing from Anthropic, and now you're like, oh, I have some energy and motivation again to write better integrations. I'm fine. Some of that, by the way, is very off-centric, which is good. Some of that, I do think that the MCP spec is very underexplored, and like everyone only focuses on the tool call side, but actually there's like prompting, actually there's inference and sampling parts of the spec that never get talked about. So people who really want to fully explore MCP should go and do all that. But primarily, like in terms of data integration, yeah, I mean, it is tool calls, right? And you've just invented another wrapper on top of APIs, and that's okay. As long as you like got the work done, I don't really care what story you need to tell yourself to like do work. Like just get the work done. I think like so the end of the story is that like yes, MCP has like deflated in Steam recently, and I think that the energy has come out of the air a little bit, and I think that's probably natural and like part of the normal order of things. But it also means that a lot of the innovations will not be done. So it is a really half-assed state of the world, which is nasty and ugly and like disappointing, but like it's just real, right? Like the task of integrating a million systems out there and like having them expose their data to you is never ending and probably will never be done. So I think like the ultimate long tail is browser use or computer use, where I don't need you to expose an MCP to me. Anything that you do that is available to a human, I can automate a computer to extract that data from your system without permission, right? Because MCP is permissioned, whereas computer use is permissionless. So I think that is a frontier. It is way too expensive. Like it's probably on the order of like 10 to 100,000 times more expensive than an API call. Harder, slower, less concurrent, rate limited, whatever you call it. So it is never going to be a perfect solution, but you will at least be able to grab some data on some sipping through some straw. And I think that's fine for some folks.
Yeah, and actually last week we had on Kyle Clark, and he was talking about the security risks with things like web browsing, where are so enabled just because of the massive surface area for threats, where there could be hidden text embedded. You never know how collecting data from a website can just kind of steer an LM the wrong direction. What I'm curious about when you talk about the permissionless aspect of the either web browsing or even an OS level AI, do you think there's going to be a need to really get people on board with being able to be totally vulnerable to this new AI system? Or do you think there's enough of the early adopters that they'll demonstrate the safety behind it and make it a bit more mainstream?
No, I think it'll hit. I think there'll be giant security crises with the mass population, especially with ChatGPT Atlas launching with like a YOLO mode, where yeah, people are just this is wide consumer stuff. So I mean, people still get phished with passwords today, from like people pretending to be their boss and on an email, like, hey, urgently, can you send me this, secret code or whatever. So if old school stuff like that works, the AI attacks is still going to work. And I think we just have to be like have multiple layers of defense instead of one, because no amount of early adopters will like iron out the most obvious ones. But like because of these tools, because everyone desires the capability, we're willing to trade off some amount of security in exchange for that, right? Like, yeah, every now and then you'll lose like money or like data, whatever. But like we actually kind of willingly take that deal because of convenience. We want convenience. We want things to arrive to us quicker, to try stuff out easier. So yeah, there are more secure ways to do it. I could add like 5 more locks to my house to make it more secure, but I don't because I only want one, because I only want one lock to my house. And I think in that same vein, like there is a trade-off, and most people will choose convenience and capability over security. And that means that like some security stuff will happen and that's fine. Because I think there's just some amount that's like inescapable, and it's better to design a system that is robust to occasional breakages than a system that expects no breakages at all, because it's going to happen. So you might as well just like almost like regularly just report in the media like, hey, such and such person got hacked, such and such person got prompt injected, keep a lookout, be aware, like raise awareness. And so everyone has like their own sovereign security posture rather than solve it for them, because you can't. Two, if you try to solve everything and protect them from everything, you won't be used. So then, like, what's the point?
Even I'm pretty into digital privacy and security, and even just getting the average Joe onto having a password manager and a VPN, it's a heavy lift for some people, and it's not like it's overly complex, but it's just the intimidation of the unknown. But wanted to pull it back a little bit into the direction that AI builders are going. Do you see any current trends or common themes that are probably misguided and a waste of effort? So people should kind of maybe dial it back and realign themselves to help actually push the frontier forward?
That's really spicy.
And it can be general themes. You don't have to call anyone out.
It's basically saying who's wasting your time. I mean, I think like now it's like relatively not consensus to say that from like 2022 to 2024, there was a big boom in vector databases that were all dedicated for RAG. And it turns out that I think like vector indexes are mostly a feature rather than a product that you could just kind of add on to an existing database. So like I think like the winners like MongoDB and Superbase and with by extension Postgres and Redis and all these guys, they just like added a vector index and moved on with their day. There are niche players there, but they've always been niche databases that like do well at their task. So like Turbo Puffer is like probably the winner of the dedicated vector database battle. But behind them is like Qtrends and Chroma and what have you. And so like there are all these people that I think put a lot of work into saying like, oh, okay, AI is going to need a new kind of database, when actually it ended up just being effectively NoSQL versus SQL all over again. because you still need hybrid search. Data does have gravity. If you want a separate search engine, Elasticsearch has got you, right? You don't need a separate like new Elasticsearch. You use Elasticsearch with vectors. They're fine. They've done this before. It was cool, and they're still here, and everyone else is coming on. So I think like one of the more obvious lowball strawman people to beat up is just like the whole vector database sector, and definitely went through like a very, very high hype cycle and now has bust.
And in areas, not necessarily like that, but in general, where there's a lot of competition, because we're all trying to get ahead and make sure we build a product that wins. Do you see a valid strategy in this day and age of going very, very hyper niche and try to solve it for one specific ICP? Or do you think more of the companies that go a bit more general will win because they can get a larger user set and kind of learn from those experiences?
Probably niche is good, but there will be generalist winners, but not because they have more users and therefore they can learn better. I think it's more about branding and being the lowest common denominator. And I think it seems like OpenAI and Perplexity are like going after that consumer brand, which is very cool. But like most people should not do what they're doing because they don't have the resources or the ambition or the go-to-market capability that these guys have. Whereas I think like people are having a relatively easier time just doing a vertical and solving it really well. So the way I put it is you should build an agent. It seems very dumb, seems like there's not that much to it, but I think there's a bell curve meme here where like the dumb people are saying build an agent, the nitwits are like, no, you have to like do all these other things that's super complex. And the Jedi are like, no, just build an agent, bro. And I think it's really like, instead of building like all these horizontal platforms and developer tooling or orchestration or another agent framework or like LLM ops stuff or whatever, and like all these things, like there will be winners that do very, very good jobs of those. But there's just more horizontal plays. I think that the hit rate is much higher if you do a vertical agent that just solves a specific need for a target buyer. All of these buyers, the lawyers, the doctors, the coders, they all have budget. They want to spend it on AI, and actually there's still not enough tooling for them, despite all the tooling that already successfully exists for them, right? They have like effectively unlimited budget, but maybe not unlimited, but like I'm a high paid lawyer, doctor, developer. I get paid like, I don't know, 200,000 or 250,000 a year. And you make being like 20% more effective. Like that's my budget, of like, I don't know, 50K to spend. And like, that's a lot of SaaS. So go build it, make it worth it. Make people feel, build like, 10x the value, capture 10% of it. I think it's totally reasonable. You can subsidize inference a bit because the cost of intelligence on a sort of level like-for-like basis goes down roughly between like 70 to 100 times per year. And so it's a really good time to be building.
One thing that I'm thinking about when we go into these hyper niche things, it's that much harder to reach the people. Do you feel that distribution and a general form of marketing is something that people should focus on when they're in this indie building space, or is like product led the way to go in this day and age? Okay, let me explain this. I feel like there's a lot of AI fatigue when everyone's just getting bombarded with AI this, AI that to actually get the right tool that solves their problem, you have to really cut through that noise. And that can be done through establishing trust. But if you go very niche, it might be hard to actually reach the people you're looking for. So do you have any advice on people who build their agent to solve this one task and how they can actually reach as many people as possible?
I think distribution is always important. I always think about like people who quote unquote focus on distribution, which is what you just said. So a recent example that is easy to beat up on is Cluely, which was pure distribution, and they had one kind of tool that didn't kind of work, and now they're basically pivoting and messaging that the business isn't working. And I think like people who are in the distribution world, like yourself and myself, I'm almost pure distribution. When you're doing podcasts, when you're doing conferences, these are all distribution things. And you tend to like say the thing that you do is obviously important, therefore you have a reason to exist in the world. But I think like it's always secondary to having good products. I think that I don't tend to use the word product led because that has come to mean very bottoms up viral sharing type work that actually may not have anything to do with how you sell or solve a problem. And it's much more about growth hacks and marketing hacks. So just working on good products for people and then finding the market that fits the product that you built or like the market insight that you had. I think it's better. And then you can pour distribution on top of it. But definitely work on the product first because I've seen bad products scale to distribution and you always run into trouble. So why, don't sign up for that ride when you know it doesn't end well. I think it's much smarter to build good products. And like, maybe I'll put it this way. Cognition ran from $0 to $10 billion in valuation with no product-led growth, right? Like it is all enterprise sales because they just talked to their customer. Product-led growth typically is taken to mean, well, you don't have to talk to the customer. There's no call us button. You just sign up. It's really, really easy to spend. It's cheap. You get free trials. You get rewards for like sharing with a friend and all that bullshit. Well, yeah, okay, cool. Try to get as Goldman Sachs that way. Like that's not right. Like this is amateur hour stuff. Build good products for serious businesses. Find real hard, difficult problems, and then pour distribution on top, which is exactly what they're doing.
And when you're trying to get in that zone of building the good product, especially in the AI space, it's so easy to do 80%. You're there, it's feeling good, get some good demos, but to actually solve the edge cases, the corner cases, that last 20% is a lot of work. Do you have any advice on people trying to implement things like evals to actually measure the improvement in their product, or what strategies can developers bring on to try to make sure that they're not just like randomly testing, they're actually like scientifically or methodically getting to the best possible state for their product?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I think generally we receive wisdom that everyone should do work on their evals, right? It's kind of like eating your vegetables of AI. And everyone knows they should do it. They probably don't do as much as they think they should, but at least a little bit is like better than nothing. It's the same with testing. It's the exact same thing of like, you should write your application and then you should write tests for your application. Do you? Well, I don't know. Like you can't cover everything. The thing that you had an outage for gets solved and you write the test for it and it never triggers again. Well, because it was solved. So you're always fighting the last war with a test, right? And so like evals do not cover everything. I think the current conversation is, yes, write evals. Brain Trust is a really good partner for that. Arise is a really good partner for that. And like there's 1,000 other eval frameworks out there. Just do whatever makes you happy, right? Write your own, whatever. But the thing is like, I think the focus next year is probably moving towards more online evals rather than offline. It's not an either or, you should have both. But I think the online evals discussion has not been relatively understood. So now what does that mean? Like A/B tests, like cohorts, analysis, like see users use stuff in production. And when you see a regression, then you go dive in rather than try to predict that from a golden test set that is kept by you and curated by you. And this probably obviously immediately matches the distribution of what your users do instead of what you think your users do. And also just immediately test against live production code rather than some sample subset of things that you had for your tests. And so you can also, it's more like a full integration test rather than a static unit test. So I think like all these things are good, and it may not matter, right? You have to do this work to try to improve, but every now and then you need to say, fuck all this, throw it all away, try to like think about the goal that your user actually wants to do and rebuild everything from scratch with new architecture, new models, new capabilities, whatever it is. Because I think like if you don't, someone else will and eat your lunch. So I think like evals are a way to systematically improve within a narrow swim lane that you've defined for yourself. But AI is moving so fast that sometimes you might be swimming up the wrong tree when everyone's moved on to the next thing. So I think not having that tunnel vision on evals while still doing evals is the tricky balance that most people need to have.
Yeah, and the idea of it being disposable code these days, where the sunk cost fallacy is a lot less impactful because we can go 0 to 1 so much quicker, has been a way that people should, at least I recommend, they adopt in their development. Do you have any other mindset shifts from maybe more seasoned developers who were pre-AI coders versus the way they work now? Things they should approach their code base with differently, or just their mentality towards building that's changed with AI?
I mean, I've been toying with this framing that your prompts should not live in your code base. And I think that it is a relatively controversial take, because even in Cognition, some of the prompts still live in the code base, but they're slowly moving off. And I'm like, well, I see the same pattern among like 10 different companies I talk to. And like everyone's doing this. So we might as well just go all the way to the end, which is that your prompts are versions alongside the models, version alongside the tools that they use. And it's a unit called an agent. And you write agent A, agent B, agent C, you call them from your application, and you make it easy to swap between the combination pinned set of prompt model tool. And I think being able to A/B test those things, to auto differentiate those things. So this is related to recent work for the DSPy community called JEPA, GEPA. And to sort of being easily able to swap out and optimize those prompts, I think is something that is being painfully learned inside of Cognition, but also in like every other company I've seen. So you might as well start from the start of like, abstract this out into its own system. Don't treat models as just the model string. Actually, it is a larger combination of that. It's grown. And everyone is trying to lock you into their SDK because they realize that. So you probably should not. You should probably isolate some kind of quote unquote microservice or model router that manages your prompts as well and the tools. And that is probably your AI gateway. So probably maybe the answer is just have an AI gateway. If you don't know what it is, look it up. Walmart has one, Salesforce has one, like Cloudflare has one, Vercel has one, like LLM has one, like just whatever. Just there's different variations of this. I just gave a talk at the Mastra TypeScript AI conference called the Impossible Triangles of LLM Infrastructure. There's about 20 or 30 things in there that are the jobs of LLM infra. Just make sure you have those. Like everyone's figured this out already. If you don't have them, you don't know what they are. Just get it. It's not that hard. It's just the ignorance that'll get you of like, oh yeah, now you're going to spend the next 6 months relearning the lesson everyone else has learned. So I think that would be my hot take. I don't know if it's like too dense. I can unpack it if you want, but have a gateway, have infra that you trust, and then go to town on like evals and building great products. But I think if you don't start from a foundation of like having good infrastructure, then probably you will move slower or independently reinvent a lot of the mistakes that have been learned over the last few years.
Yeah, I'd love to actually go a little bit into infrastructure. Like I'm building an internal system at Box One Ventures, and we're trying to make things efficient. And through my learnings here, I'm trying to apply different things. But I'd love to hear your take on either best practices in general, tools to look out for, or someone who's just put up their own app for the first time and they want to start scaling it, or they want to get a system so they can more rapidly iterate on it. What systems should I have in place? What principles should they keep in mind? And any tips there would be welcome.
Yeah. I mean, I think exactly what I said. If you look up the write-up on the LLM Infra Triangle, you'll see it. It's on Namespace and on my personal blog. And I think the main idea is that exactly what you said, right? Like, okay, you have a place where you can scale things up and also iterate faster. I think the iterate faster side is more important than the scale things up side, because scale things up side, most tooling that you find will probably scale to something that, like, if you really have, millions of users, then you have a high class problem and you can hire to solve it, right? That's not the issue. The issue is not iterating fast enough to get a good product. That's the real issue. And so everything needs to be tuned to fast iteration. Everything needs to give you joy in terms of looking at your data and looking at logs. And, it's a painful thing, but if you're still doing it inside of a notebook or in your terminal logs, you're probably not doing it right. You should probably look at things in the playground. You should probably be looking at traces in a nice UI. it's the same info, just presented better, so it's less painful because it's painful. So, so any kind of infra that lets you, makes it easier for you, more enjoyable, whatever, is good because it helps you iterate faster and keeps you locked in and motivated and whatever. And I think that's beautiful.
And one thing I've been getting the habit in as an engineering team of one is trying to create scripts for all the process I run. Silly example, deploy. So there's a deploy.py, so I can actually have the LLM call it and run through the process of deploying up to AWS. So I don't have to worry about those type of things. Have you seen any other best practices or just like cool things people have implemented via a script that's normally a human process, just take a little of that human error out of the situation?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have that myself all the time. These are all vibe coded, but like it's fine. It's like a bash file that is like run, and then it like the AI sometimes like decides to add its own flags and use the flags, right? So you just make sure that it's documented inside of the README, so you can just pick it up and move on in the future. So yeah, totally these kinds of deploy scripts I think are totally interesting. I do worry that we are basically kind of independently reinventing Terraform. The DevOps people are screaming at us because they're like, "What the hell are you doing? Like we like we're doing this like 10 years ago." But like it's not that hard, and like if it just solves your needs, then that's great. I think the issue comes with like again like the ignorance of like, well, hundreds of thousands of people have been here before us, and like here's all the things that they solved, and they came up with Terraform, and that's the thing you should be using, or whatever. Scripts beyond that, Terraform isn't the end all and be all. But like, if it's a deploy script, then like, yeah, you start veering into things like that, and I think that's okay. I think finding a platform that you're just really familiar with and capable of shipping well is the key, because it's not about scaling, it's about iterating quickly. And so, for example, if you like really like Fly.io, right, and you like the Fly TOML, then just do the Fly TOML, right? Like, I mean, it's not really like you can rewrite it in future if you need to move to AWS or something, but like it's fine. Just get it out there, get it done quickly, and make sure it works reliably, and that's good for your first 100 users. If you don't get to them, you don't get to the next 1,000 and next million. So like, yeah.
We put a lot of focus on the 0 to 1 stage, the developers building their own tool. But I'd like to pivot slightly for a moment to the existing systems trying to implement AI into it. We've seen a bunch of cringy, throw a chatbot on it and let them have at it. But have you seen any big wins or big misses from companies who had an existing product trying to implement AI into it and just either didn't land well or was a wild success?
There's tons that didn't land well. I mean, I think that the status quo is that it's not going to land well, and that's okay. Like we don't really know what it is. I feel like the common ones are like the Hertz, or like the Southwest Airlines just customer support bots that like make up rules, or like sell a car for like $1 or whatever. All these are fun and like going to happen. And I think like the more interesting ones are things like, people love it when I call out like Replit. Replit's crushing life now, but for 2.5 years, they kind of struggled with their AI thing. And it used to be called Ghostwriter, and it used to be like their in-house Copilot thing. And then they launched Agent V1, which people don't remember. And only until Agent V2 did anything actually take off. And I think like that's how it is, right? Like, and I would maybe call out the same for Notion, where I would say like the initial Notion was like, just help me write, keep writing. No one who uses Notion actually needs that. But now they're like going really hard on like meeting notes, and like having dedicated space for meetings, and like having a Notion agents that like goes through all your notes and, proactively does stuff for you. I think like it just takes a while for these folks to like really get the AI integration, and probably the first iteration wasn't that great. They knew it, they shipped it anyway, and they just kept going. And I think like the mistake here is for the chattering class like us to judge them on their V1. And yeah, so I think like, sure, plenty of examples of poor implementations, but who among us is not guilty of not thinking that thoroughly and like, coming out with the final form from day one. So I'm not that bothered by it. I think everyone is figuring things out. Maybe I was like, we're on Riverside right now. I think from day one, the Riverside AI stuff was like pretty good. And I think Descript also, like basically like the creator tooling companies probably did a better job of the AI integrations from day one, and then just minorly iterated from there. Superhuman and Slack. Yeah, those are like my two negatives. I would say I don't think Superhuman has really nailed AI. In Slack, it still doesn't have agentic search, so it is what it is.
Yep. Awesome. Appreciate that. Last question from me. What AI tool do you wish exists today that doesn't currently?
Yeah, there's tons of these, and like, oh man, it's so tempting to just want to build all of them. I think like everyone wants Smart Siri, and my friends built Reply RPLY, which is one of those the Smart Siri bots. And I think like everyone's just kind of waiting for Apple to come up with better Siri or OpenAI to come up with the phone, and it looks like actually we'll probably get the OpenAI phone before we get Smart Siri, which is probably good for like the future of consumer tech, because hardware, it's really like the limiting thing. Like software is easy to write and build and iterate on, but hardware, takes cycles and actual atoms in China and stuff. So I think like that, like Smart Siri would be good, where it's like a real personal assistant that has all the context and everything. I wear the Bee, which is this sort of transcriber thing that has 7-day battery life and just transcribes everything I say. And yeah, I think like Smart Siri is a good category for all these things. And then maybe I'll throw in one more, which is sort of what has been started on with ChatGPT Pulse, which is an async proactive agent, right? People have tried a little bit of this, but not very well. And like even ChatGPT's version isn't like that mind blowing. It's honestly just like a newspaper that is somewhat personalized by your recent searches. That's all it is, but it's something. And I think like whoever ends up nailing this feature is going to do super, super well. And I don't think we've seen the final form of it yet.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, my previous startup, Benetic, we took a swing at it. It's a hard problem to solve, so I'm also hoping someone gets it. Shawn, this was awesome. Really appreciate coming on and get through the conversation. Before I let you go, is there anything you want the audience to know?
I mean, I guess build agents. If you want more of the work that, I think like what I try to do in these kinds of podcasts is just to drop a little bit of what I'm seeing across latent space and AIE and Cognition. If you want to follow more of it, definitely check out just latent.space or AI.engineer or Cognition.ai. And yeah, I mean, happy to connect on Twitter if anyone wants to follow up more.
Thank you for listening to Conversation with Swyx. It's always great getting advice from someone who has such a deep insight into the space and really has his finger on the pulse for what's going on in the AI space. I'm curious, with the projects and tools you're building right now, did any of Swyx's input change your opinion? Do you think you're going to alter the way you're building things? I'd love to know what you're working on. So if you could please like and subscribe, it would really mean a lot, and I'll see you next week.